All right, welcome to the podcast, guys. Today we have someone on the show who I have tremendous respect for. And, one of the things I think everybody should know is what it takes to sort of get on the show. I like people that are dedicated to what they do. They're passionate about what they do, and they never want to stop growing. I think growth is part of life. I don't think people stay healthy if they stay stagnant. One of my themes in all of my work is that stagnation is disease and flow is health, right? So you've heard me say that if you watch these podcasts. And one of the biggest ways to create flow in your body is yoga. And when you say yoga to somebody, you usually get this like, oh, God, it's a really funny reaction often, because it needs, in my opinion, to be demystified. There's still a lot of bizarre ideas about yoga that really aren't backed up by any facts. That yoga might not be for you. It's this, it's that. So today on the show, we have somebody that knows yoga. She does one-on-one yoga therapy sessions. I did one with her. It was pretty amazing. And then, of course, she does yoga in classes online. And she's been doing it for quite a while, which I'm sure she'll get into, tell us about her experience. She comes from a background of, running her own business in the past and not a yoga business, before when she was first getting started in life. And so she has, business savvy as well, which I think really helps to get across what yoga is to people. To be a communicator, to have multiple skills, it's always valuable. I looked up a couple of yoga facts for myself, and I had heard how old yoga was. And, I looked up and it said it's somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 years old. And, this series is called Ancient Wisdom, Modern Science, and Common Sense. So you can imagine how much respect I have for something that's 5 to 10,000 years old. Anybody with any real thought will realize that, truth has a way of surviving, and fallacy has a way of time just beating it up. And to exist that long as a science, an art, a craft, a healing art, obviously, it's got to be good, right? I mean, in 5,000 years of people doing it, maybe 10,000 years. It started in northern India, and it helps with strength, flexibility, and balance. I think people forget about the balance part of that. If you've done some yoga, you may even realize the strength and the flexibility aspect, but you may not realize about balance. And one of the things I see in my patients as they get even in their 40s, they start losing the ability to sort of just stay on their feet and be solid, unless they're trying something really, really prominent to build that balance and work on that part of their body. They start to lose balance, and that's the beginning of falling down, and that's the beginning of face planting, and it gets ugly, as you can imagine. The research on it, there's a lot of research I found on heart disease, BMI, cholesterol, and blood pressure being, parts of that. BMI, someone's body mass, right? How much fat versus muscle they are. And so I think it's amazing. So welcome to the show today, Christine Zebrowski, yoga extraordinaire, I guess I could call you. You can flesh that out. How are you?
I'm doing great. Delighted to be here.
Excellent, excellent. So I'm so happy you decided to do this with me, because it's something that there's only so many people that I feel I've referred you patients over the years. You've referred me patients or clients, whatever you call them in your business. And I can send them to you with absolute confidence that they're going to be treated fantastically. No one's ever come back and said otherwise. And you're a loving, caring person that takes people and meets them where they're at and brings them to the next level. And that's why I've always enjoyed your company, as well as being in, sort of in business with you, I guess we'd say, right? We're helping people out and getting people to work on their frames, right? A chiropractor, as everyone knows, works on the frame. And I think yoga has so much mystery. And today we're going to take that mystery down a notch and get people to understand why they should be doing yoga. I can't think of somebody who can't or shouldn't be doing some form of yoga. I think you mentioned that book. Is it Yoga on an Airplane or Airplane Yoga?
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah.
And I thought, if you can do yoga in an airplane seat, that is phenomenal. I had to get that book. I have it somewhere. I thought that really just shows the reason I love that title is in writing my book. I thought, what titles should there be? You want a title that grabs a person, and yoga on an airplane just sounds so insane. You think you need the mat and the space and the tranquil environment, but here you are 600 miles an hour, 30,000 feet in the air, stuffed in your seat like a sardine, and somehow you're doing yoga. So that to me said, boy, just about anybody can do it, and it isn't like you don't have a place for it. So let's get started. So what started you in yoga? Tell us a little bit about your journey. Like, how did you become a yoga instructor or interested in yoga?
Well, back in the 70s, my ex and I started a business, and it was very stressful, very, very stressful business, retail business. I loved it, but it was very stressful. And after about 10 years, my partner wanted to take yoga. So he took yoga, which I was very surprised, and he did really well with it. And I noticed a difference in him. He usually was like kind of a angry person. He could get angry real easy. But after doing yoga, he was a lot calmer. I kind of wait for the backlash, and it wasn't there. And so I thought there must be something more to it. So I started taking it. And to be honest with you, I did not like it.
Oh, that's funny.
Slow, I was already strong, and I'd been doing aerobics and, weightlifting, and I felt strong, and I'm like, why do I need this? And then I took it because I said I was going to take it. So I took it. And by the end of the 8 weeks, the teacher asked me if I wanted to teach it. I had fallen in love with it.
Wow.
And of course, it took a while before I could teach it, but she could see my passion for it and how I developed. But my first instinct was, no, I don't think this is for me. I wanted to go back to aerobics. And so within a couple years, I was teaching it.
That's fantastic. And you think about the different trends that have gone through jazzercise and everything imaginable over the years. I remember, watching Jane Fonda do her exercise tape and the different things that have gone on. Meanwhile, yoga just stayed there in the background, doing its thing, never dying out, having surges and ebbs and flows maybe over time, but because of its higher truth and its power, it's amazing. I can remember Deepak Chopra saying that through yoga and meditation, you could lose weight. And I thought, wow, that's really interesting. That was like 10 years ago. And I thought, I know that to be potentially true, but I thought that's an interesting thing to say, because so many people think of weight loss as burning those calories. Calories are units of heat, and we need to heat up and sweat and toil, or, go on a diet that is, maybe restrictive. And a lot of times when you get into a peaceful state, you're not using food to soothe yourself. Right. One of the things that anxiety causes is the want to change your state of mind. Like, I don't want to be anxious. And people turn from drugs to alcohol to God knows what. And yoga is something you can turn to that doesn't toxify anything and just creates harmony. And like you said, I love that you didn't like it at first. That's funny. I didn't know that, because you seem like such a yoga person to me that I can't imagine your nature was anti-yoga.
I know.
But, that must have been, I remember hearing that massive rejection is the key to success. In other words, if you have a new idea, and I think that can happen at a personal level. In other words, you reject something because it's so in your face and it's so what you need that it's almost painful to go to that place. I know when I get into weight training, I did a lot of stuff, and then someone taught me to do an overhead lunge where you push weight over your head and lunge at the same time. I was so bad at it that I was excited, actually, because I hated it. And I thought, God, but I realized that part of my body wasn't developed. And that was a lot of good musculature of the back, of all things, right? I'm a chiropractor. So to not have back strength is like a cardinal sin. And I realized I'm going to get good at overhead lunges, overhead squats. And I've become, let's say, proficient at it at this point. And it is, I wouldn't say life-changing, but it was pretty cool that it changed how my body, my posture of all great stuff. Because as a chiropractor, you're bent over people all day, right? So you got to watch the irony, right? The irony of that. You're all hunched over.
I thought about that before.
One of the things. One of the things that a fellow chiropractor told me one time was to use postural disengagement. And I said, what does that mean exactly? And he means to do the opposite of what you're doing. So if you're bent over with your palms down, you stand up and bring your palms up, basically, right? You do the opposite. So I've taught people postural disengagement exercises from being seated. people sit at a desk all day in that what I think they call it the praying rat position, right? You're almost like typing away at your keyboard, and to do the opposite, which it might be sun salutation, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Okay.
Sort of the opposite of that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure you probably know 10 different ways of doing that. So for people, give me your definition of yoga. People can look it up and Google it and everything else. But in your mind, how would you define yoga?
Well, I'm gonna come from a more Western thought process.
Okay.
So if you ask somebody from India, it's going to have a very kind of religious background.
Right.
It comes from the Hindu religion, and that was one of the things that kind of turned me off in the beginning, was that I was a Christian, and I didn't resonate with some of the gods and goddesses and names, and I was like, that's why my business is now called Yoga by Design. So I Westernized it. So it's a way to find peacefulness within yourself. Most of us look for peace out there. Like we think, okay, if this person's this way or somebody drives better, I'm going to be calm. So no matter what's going on around you, yoga shows you how to bring that calm from within you rather than trying to seek it outside yourself. It's never going to come from outside you.
That's a massive discovery if you think about it. I mean, what bigger spiritual journey maybe is the right word to use to describe the recognition that peace is an internal job, and that a skill set to be able to create that. Like you're saying, you're in a car and someone's driving maybe in a way you don't like, so you're screaming and freaking out. And maybe there's a small amount of time where maybe that's valuable because someone really is, driving in an insane fashion. But the majority of the time, it's just, he didn't put his blinker on. I wish you would switch lanes. Why you're traveling so close to that person? Kind of minutia, right? I mean, it's definitely, it's really picking at stuff. And if you had inner peace, that wouldn't bother you. And inner peace sounds like, once again, one of these out there crazy things that people can't achieve. But obviously you came from running a business to a point of teaching inner peace through yoga. And not to say that anybody could do it, but you did it. You were raised in the West. You're a Christian faith. So, it isn't like you're an oddity for this area. You're in some ways very typical of how we grew up, right? That's how we were raised. So if you can do it, you'd be a great communicator of how other people can do it that came from the same mindset and background.
Right. That's
fantastic.
And I think that's one of the things is that people gravitate to my style that do gravitate. It's because they have that same mindset. Now, there's some people who come in and say, well, I want to pray to Buddha. And I'm going, well, you're not going to find that here, So I've actually had people say that to me, wanting me to teach them about Buddha. And I go, no, it's not, but that's the misconception that I'd like to clear up with people. It doesn't interfere with your faith, no matter what faith you are. Yoga is a science. Okay? It's a way of life, but it doesn't interfere at all with your faith. So that's a real important thing. I think a lot of people, we need to debunk that myth.
Yeah, I've even asked people if they thought Buddhism was a faith or a philosophy, because there's so much philosophically sound comments that agree with so many other faiths. That is it, and I think it's still to this point a debatable. I mean, I'm sure a Buddhist is going to say, well, it's my faith, but faith and philosophy, those are fuzzy lines between those two. Be a great conversation to have with somebody that spent more time in that concept of which one is it, right? But I never introduced yoga was not introduced to me having anything to do with Buddha or even India. I just thought it was yoga, right? So I found out later it came from India. That's great. And then there was a Hindu and a Buddhist type of background, and that's fine. I mean, I don't have a problem with that at all. But I was more into, can I hold this posture without falling over? I mean, my focus wasn't really anything else. And am I breathing deep enough? I'm looking at someone else going, wow, I can't believe a person could do that. That's so amazing. But how many different styles of yoga are there? you hear about different styles.
Yes,
Is it
yeah. There
countless?
are many, hundreds and hundreds of styles, especially in India. And just about every village has a teacher, a guru or a sadhu, and they teach their style of yoga. So the most popular are Iyengar yoga, Himalayan yoga, of course, I'm trying a bunch of other ones without getting into
Okay.
it. There's so many, but each teacher brings themselves to the party. So if somebody's a very physical, really into very athletic, he might bring that, whereas another teacher might be more mindful and more meditative
Right.
style. And I was taught under the Himalayan style and the Kripalu style of
Hmm.
yoga, and I gravitated to Kripalu style, which is a more feminine type of yoga. It's not as rigid or
Okay.
steeped in dogma. It's a
Okay.
softer kind of, and that resonated with me and my personality. You know me, but it
Yeah.
resonated with me. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mhm.
I think it's interesting how martial arts and yoga have some overlay. One of the things I studied for a very short time, just didn't have enough time, but I was very fascinated in it, was some of the martial arts that are really based more in peaceful movement more than they are, sort of violent or defensive. And I remember one form, their sort of catchphrase was a way of harmony. And they said that if someone gives you a gift and you refuse to take it, they still have the gift. So if someone comes to you with force and you give the force back to them, whatever they gave you, you give it back to them. So if someone was to throw themselves at you, you got out of the way, and they hit the ground, they would actually be, doing the damage to themselves, almost like a lesson versus, being violent or being disruptive. And I think you're talking about the different, how aggressive some yoga is and how yin
Yeah,
and yang, maybe it is,
very much
different
so.
forms of yoga. So how
Mhm.
does a person know if they're just going to go out and do yoga? How do they know which one they're getting involved in? If you take like a super athlete and he or she wants to get involved in yoga, how would you direct them? Do you have different practitioners, or how far do you go away from the yoga you just described?
Well, okay, let's deal with what first question was. What would be safe way maybe for people to come to yoga, you mean, or that want to
Right.
know about yoga?
Hmm.
Yeah, so the first part would be, okay, so you want to talk to a yoga teacher. So there's a number of yoga teachers on the internet. There's also teachers that still have studios, but it's a good idea to connect with them either by email, text, or voice, and just talk to them and just ask, tell them what you're looking for and see if it's a match. And most teachers will let you do the first class free. I do that in my class. So you don't want to just jump in without knowing, or worse yet, without the teacher knowing you. That's a big
Okay.
mistake. And that's one of the bad things about the internet. There's a lot of good things about the internet and yoga on the internet, but the bad thing is people get involved with things they have no business getting involved with at that time.
Sure.
And so it's good to do a little research, take responsibility, do a little research. And the best way is to talk to somebody that's already doing yoga that you might know. Most people have somebody in their life that's doing yoga. Talk to that person. And, there's yoga in the gyms, which is, a little different than having it like on the internet with a teacher that's really committed to her students. Where in the gym, people come in and out all the time. You don't even know who they are.
Right.
I recommend, especially for my focus is the over 50 crowd. Although I have younger people in my class, and many people have grown into my classes. I have people that started when they were in their 60s are now in their 80s. I have people that started in their 30s that are now in their 50s, so but finding a teacher that matches you and what you're looking for. So if maybe you're preparing to run a marathon, you would do certainly a different type of yoga than somebody who's just looking for more peaceful place and
I gotcha.
some toning
Yeah.
and being able to have some peace within themselves.
Yeah, like build endurance. So you could confidently say that yoga's for everyone?
I can. I've
Good.
even done yoga one-on-one with people in hospital beds.
Great. I
Yeah.
believe it.
Yeah. And I one in particular, the woman had terminal cancer, and it was a friend, one of my friends, her mom. She had some familiarity with yoga, so it wasn't, she had a little, but she never thought she'd be able to do it in bed. And I just talked her through it, and I had her visualize it in bed. And when the aides came in after we were done, they could not believe the amount of mobility and strength she had after that class. And it still gives me goosebumps to think about it, because it gave her a quality of life, a little bit more time and quality of life and confidence that she could do more than she thought. So even somebody who's never done yoga, I could do it in a hospital bed, on a chair. I do it online, and some of my students, some of the work I do, some of the people are online and they're in their bed because they can't get down on the floor. So that's a nice advantage of having it online.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fantastic. And I can picture that because in the yoga that I've done, I can imagine that you can create a setting out of almost any environment and create yogic-like muscle tone and positioning to whatever degree that person's able to pull it off.
Exactly. To whatever degree. It's not going to be, you're not going to compare it to somebody like yourself who's really, fit and toned and, do hiking and you have an athletic background. Yeah, no, somebody that it's going to be a little different. So I appeal to all ends of the spectrum, from hospital beds to people who are really physically fit. That's for everybody.
Excellent. Now, one of the questions that I know I've had when I've recommended somebody yoga is they're afraid they're going to get hurt. And obviously it's a matter of pacing it, but how do you answer that question if someone's concerned, can I get hurt doing this?
Wow, that's a great question, and one that I've addressed over the years. One of the best ways to ensure that you'll get hurt with yoga is to do it online without knowing the teacher. Okay? You need to know the teacher needs. There's a relationship between the teacher and the student. That's not talked about in our society. We just, run into the gym class and do a few yoga poses and run out. I feel better. It's way more than that, especially if you have some concern. So one of the ways I recommend, if somebody has a concern, I might recommend that they do a few private sessions. So I've had couples do that, and sisters do it. Sometimes it's a little cheaper when you do private, semi-private, and maybe do 3 to 6 private sessions to build your confidence and find. So if you've had a recent knee replacement, maybe only 6 months out, certainly I would be afraid myself, I think, to come into a class, that soon. So I would want to maybe take a couple of private classes. And then the teacher can, when you go into the class, you'll understand more in the group setting how to manage and, know my directives and what works, what doesn't work. And then I know that person. So in the class, I might say, well, here's an alternative. You can do this instead of this. And you won't even know that I'm talking about that person. They know it's them, and other people will pick up on it. So I give people alternatives. And, that is a responsibility that the person really needs to take. If it hurts, you don't do it. It's that, like, oh, doctor, it hurts when I do this. Well, don't do this. So, but we are so, in our society, our culture, we are so attuned to, if it doesn't hurt, something's wrong. I'm not doing enough.
Yeah. I see it all the time.
Yoga, in yoga. And I mean, I even heard a football player on Johnny Carson years ago, and he had just retired, and he went to the gym and he worked out 6 hours a day, he's used to it. So he went to the gym and he'd meet these people, and it was the first time he was in a a regular atmosphere, not being controlled in the football and by the football team. And he could not believe that people would come the first day to work out, never worked out before, and would work out for 2 hours.
Yeah. Wow.
Where's that common sense?
Yeah.
You know, so you have to apply common sense. So the first time, doing a half hour, an hour private session really will build your confidence and less likely to get hurt. But I talk them through it a lot too. I'll say, if this is starting to hurt your knees, back off. If this movement hurts your shoulders, bring your shoulder up, bring it down. So I give them instruction so that they start to learn you don't have to hurt yourself to do yoga. You don't have to hurt yourself to do anything, whether it's raking, shoveling. You don't have to hurt yourself. There are ways to do it. And you start to learn that and bring it into your life off the yoga mat. I call it yoga off the mat.
Uh-huh.
So when you're raking, you're cognizant, I'm going to do this side, and then I'm going to do this side, balance it out, take a little break, drink of water. Those are the things we learn in yoga.
I think that parallels my profession in that people, as I get to know their sort of body integrity, obviously we take a history in an exam and we ask a lot of great questions. So I get an idea right away of what kind of force and what kind of length of treatment and how much muscle work and stretching and adjustment ferocity, what tools will I use, what technique will I use, is based on an old time chiropractor said there's only 2 types of patients, hard and soft. And he said, and they never look the same. You can have a 90-pound woman and you got to use incredible force or she's not ever going to get better. And you could have a football player like you're referring to, 6'5", 300 pounds, and you better be light because they have other issues. You can't just judge that from judge the book by the cover. You got to get to know the person. Like you're saying, I always invite a patient to come along and sit on a stool, a prospective patient, with the person who might refer them in and ask me any questions while I'm working on their friend. And they can see what it looks like. And the person pops off the table and says, hey, look at that. That was great. And then they can get more comfortable. And I think that chiropractic's been around in Western culture because it's invented here, right here in Davenport, Iowa, so long. And I think yoga is that one step more mystifying. So people, need to get a little more comfortable. Taking a complimentary class from you or from somebody, I think that's a fantastic idea. Get to, like you're saying, I get to know them, they get to know me or you, and they can and pay attention to their body and don't push it. I know personal trainers who never want the client to be sore after the workout. They want them to, like they'll say, you can do 10 chin-ups. All right, we're going to do 5 today. And tomorrow we're going to do 6. But every day they're doing something. It's just never the big blowout workout. Right. And that probably comes from a yogic philosophy then. The way you're saying it, that's probably maybe that personal trainer is a yogi, and he has a lot of respect for the idea of
martial arts background. Same thing too. A lot of people think that not all martial arts are really as intense as people think they are.
Not at all. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
No. So, in your mind, why are people hesitant to do yoga? What's the biggest hesitation? We might have covered some of that, but in summary, what's the first big hesitation? You talked about the faith area. What else do you see?
We talked about that, but one of the things, and this one kind of makes me laugh a bit, not to laugh at people, but this is just how we are as human beings. They'll say to me or to one of my students, well, I can't do yoga. I'm not flexible.
Yeah, isn't that funny?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. And it's like sort of saying, well, I can't drive a car because I don't know how to drive a car.
I love it.
It's absurd, but I understand where they're coming from.
Yeah.
So I just ask them, well, just look at that question. So what is it that has you say, I'm not flexible? Well, I usually have, they'll tell me, but I usually share a story. When my daughter was 9 years old, she said, Mom, can you touch your toes? And I go, sure. And I went halfway down and I went, what happened? I used to be able to touch my toes. if you don't continue to do it, you're not going to be able to do it. It's just
That's
a
right.
matter of doing it. And I have the same thing of people say, well, do I have to get down on the floor because I don't think I can get up?
Yeah.
And one of the things we practice, not in all the classes, because some of the classes can be on chair or in the bed. There's different levels of classes, but one of the things I have them do is practice getting up and down off the floor, not just in class, but at home. If you fall down at home, you've never gotten up off the floor for 20 years. Your body is totally forgotten. The muscles, the nervous system has sending messages. The muscles are going, what? What do you have to do? We have to open up those neurological pathways by practicing it. So I say, when you sit down to watch TV, sit on the floor for the first 10 minutes, then get up.
Yeah.
And then you'll do it once a day. You'll never have trouble getting up and down off the floor or worry about falling and not getting up. And that's a big problem in our senior population.
Absolutely.
They make a lot of money on that too, selling devices and different services and stuff to protect people. But the best way is to be proactive. Get down on the floor. It may not be easy the first time, but with the yoga and the yoga practices, it'll get easier and easier. And then you'll find yourself, people say, all of a sudden I squatted down in the grocery store and I popped right up and I didn't even know I could do that. But they've been doing yoga for a year. They could never have done that before. One of my students, he was quite rotund. I'll say obese. He came to yoga and he was bicycling and he was getting healthier and he was losing weight, but he was still very much overweight. And he said, my wife wants to come to yoga. I never thought she would come. And I go, oh, what changed your mind? He goes, when I was in the restaurant and I dropped my fork and I just picked it up real quick and picked it up. I'd never done that for 10 years.
Wow.
I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And so just those simple things, just being able to have quality of life and confidence.
You make a good point. One of the things that I can share my personal experience is when I first started doing planks, I got in this idea that I wanted to do this plank challenge. And as I was getting more proficient at it, I remember getting down on the floor with my kids when they were younger, and I popped right up from a plank position. I just snapped my knees up and stood up. And I thought, that's way easier than it used to be. That is way easier. Yeah. And then, of course, why wouldn't it be, since I'm popping up out of something that I've been trying to hold for minutes. And I thought, what a great skill set to be able to get off the ground. A lot of the training I do is in Primal Movements. And these are things that are basic survival movements, being able to do a chin up or a pull up and getting off the ground really fast and how to roll up and all these other things. And a plank is such an amazing skill set to develop for your own survival. One of the ways of getting up would be to come up from a plank position. And obviously there's a bunch of ways of getting up, depending if you have to hang on to countertops and chairs, but certainly the ability to move like that. So I believe that people should let go of a lot of the hesitations. And I hopefully after watching this podcast, we'll win a bunch of people over to go and do yoga and improve their lives, whether they come and see you or they're in Texas and they see somebody, but get to know your instructor and take it that way. What would you say yoga does for a person? Summarize that. We covered some talk about that, but if a person goes to yoga and they said, well, I don't know, is this doing anything? Like what would you say a person should say? Okay, wow, I think I've achieved those 3 things or those 5 things. What does it do?
Well, usually most people will come to yoga when they're under some sort of stress, mentally or physically. So they usually come to improve balance or to help their back, or they may come because they've had a traumatic incident in their life, whether like divorce or death or something like that. And they want peace, or somebody's dying and they want that peacefulness. So people come for different reasons. They either come for the physical or they come for the more I want to say spiritual, but it's not necessarily, not everybody does.
I know what you mean, yeah.
Peace, more of a peaceful feeling inside and a calmness, be able to relax in the face of all that's going on in their world. But most people find the people that come for physical are amazed at how calm and how quickly they can calm themselves, most people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a tool. I always say you have your little yoga tool belt and you have all these little tools. So it's not just the movements or what we call postures or asanas that you're familiar with, like tree pose, standing on one foot, or down dog, which most people are familiar of seeing. That little tool, each one of those poses bring a certain thing to you. Like downward dog really improves your posture.
Mm-hmm.
Helps the upper back muscles, opens up your chest. So it really improves your posture, and you wouldn't think it would. But it also, because your head is below your heart, it makes you just kind of stop thinking with your head and you start to think more with your heart. Now, there's a time to think with your head. Absolutely. We want that analytical, but there's sometimes the analytical like this gets in the way, right? The little blah, 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 you did this and how come you did this, and that anxiety kind of issue. So the anxiety goes away, your mind quiets, and your heart just kind of takes over. And by the time you come up out of that pose, you're way calmer. It's not just
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
That's
so
what I think.
Every pose brings something to it.
Yeah, what I think is fascinating about that is I was always fascinated that the gut, the intestines, are considered the second brain. And then I read further about that concept that we could have a cellular sort of thinking apparatus, and maybe it's the amount of microflora that are in there, making 4 pounds, I think it is, of bacteria, that healthy bacteria too, in the intestine. That's the second brain. And that we, the old phrase gut feeling actually is more than just a silly phrase. It actually comes from like a sense of reality, or we think of there's, I think, the same number of neurons in your intestine than there's in your brain. So full on a second brain. And then after reading and researching that more, I found that the heart is recently being called the third brain. So it's interesting that you said that about pooling blood and using position to sort of call to the front of consciousness, or the front of use, the heart, and heart energy is such a beautiful thing to be expressing. So, I mean, the analytical thing is so important, and but we're not just machines, we're human beings, and to be valued for we're valued for all of these things, but in some arenas, if we're just looking at IQ all the time to look at someone's value in society, we're making a big mistake, because massive, because we're making kind of a mess, and well, I don't know, I don't want to be a robot. I like to be smart, but at the same time, I'd like to, have loving and caring emotions for people, and be a full human being. And society, if it needs to reward people, and it does reward people, but some people aren't paying attention to how much EQ versus IQ, those two concepts, I think, are pretty cool too, right? The emotional equivalent. So, but yeah, I think that's that makes a good point. Online yoga, you mentioned earlier, and that's a question I wanted to ask you, because this this pandemic has caused so many people to hide in their houses and use computers to communicate, and certainly. How has that changed? I don't know if all your classes are online right now, but I know that they at least were for a while. And do you have a preference, and what's the benefits and the losses of both of these things?
Well, if somebody had told me before the pandemic that I would really love the way yoga comes across online and being able to teach online and loving it, I would have said, no way. But I have grown in my ability to teach, because I've learned more and more to touch people with my words. So using phrases and words, it's sort of like I had certain phrases, and sort of like listening to the radio, and you're listening to one station all the time, and that those phrases work, and people got the music, they enjoyed it. But now I have all different stations to play, all different ways of coming across. And I find that people, because they're at home and they're relaxed, They don't have to worry about, going out to the car and brushing it off after class and, worrying about, is my husband, the dog okay? They're right there. And because they're there, they're more relaxed. They get into it deeper. They are able to do longer. And the best part is everybody would always say at the end of class, I love the guided relaxation. Can we just stay here a little longer? Well,
Yes.
now they can. Now they can. So I can just put them in a Zoom room and they can continue their relaxation, do it a little longer. So instead of doing 10, 15 minutes, they can do 20 minutes, which is the best. But I don't usually take 20 minutes in a class. Once in a while I do for a relaxation. But it's favorite part, but it's the hardest part to do on your own.
Ah, interesting. Yeah.
Relax,
Yeah. I found
that's
that.
the balance. The counter, when you said counter, I used the word counter pose. So when you used another term, your friend used another term, I forgot the term. But when you do one way, sitting all the time, you want to get up and go the other way, right? I call it
postural disengagement. Right.
Postural disengagement. I love new phrases.
Okay.
Counter pose. Counter pose. For every pose, there's a counter pose. And so finding that, that sweet place. And you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to be really good at it. And I just want to put one more thing in here, and because I'm afraid it might not get addressed, and this is so important, is one of the things that people say stops them from doing yoga is, I'm too old.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And I've heard 40-year-olds say that, 50-year-olds, 60. Now, you would expect that of a 70, maybe 80-year-old. And by the way, I'm 73 and I'm still doing it,
Holy cow, you look fantastic.
And I've got students, I have several students that are in their 80s. They've been coming to me for over 20 years.
That's fantastic.
So, and they are what kept me, when I decided to go on Zoom and let go of the studio, they all came. A whole, not as many as I had before, but those devoted students came because they didn't want to do without it. And even though they could do their own practice at home, they all came, and they will tell you the same thing. I don't feel 80. I don't feel 73.
Yeah.
Sometimes I look in the mirror in the morning and I do, but for the most part, I have the confidence in my body, and that's what makes you feel young. Posture, number one, makes you feel young. You're like this and you don't know how to improve your posture, and knowing how to improve your posture, like if you just go, I'm going to throw my shoulders back, put my belly in, tighten up my buttocks, and I'll have better posture. Knowing that does not improve your posture.
Right.
It does not improve it.
So true. Yeah.
You have to practice getting those muscles connected through the nervous system to wake up those muscles that are the web of muscles for posture.
Right.
Balance for balance, posture, balance. So age, anybody can do yoga. Don't let age stop you. You will find you might have to do the chair yoga for a while or take some private, but you will be amazed in a short time the progress you can make. That always amazes me to this day. That, like I'll show people a posture and maybe it's a little difficult, and then in the next week, they maybe never even practice it again. The second week, they're doing way better, way better. So if you set that intention that you want to be fit, that you want to be peaceful, you'll find it. You'll find it maybe in yoga or martial arts or whatever it is that you want to get into. But yoga, to me, is one of the best vehicles.
Yeah, and what you said about posture, I always try to get across to people that you train your posture to a point where it's instinctual to be posturally correct. Not, I have to say, oh, think again, you got to bring your shoulders back, do this stuff. It shouldn't be something you have to think of, because you're going to think of something else really soon, then you're going to fall out of that posture, right?
Exactly.
So to be able to train that in. And one thing about the guided meditation you mentioned a minute ago was my wife and I taught natural childbirth classes. Now she's really the expert in that, and she pulled off 3 natural childbirths, and I coach them to whatever degree that was helpful. But we studied it, and then we started teaching what's called Bradley method, which I recommend everybody do. You don't have to have a natural childbirth necessarily to take these classes. It just makes the whole breathing experience way better.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
But what we did was we had a guided meditation in the one class. It was, you know, it was 10 classes, 2 hours each. And in one of the classes, I taught, you know, stretching and a little bit about posture, actually, even during, you know, later stages of pregnancy. And the guided meditation. So during and in between contractions, women can rejuvenate their energy by getting into meditative / relaxing states. And it was always something that people didn't want it to end. I would have the couples spoon each other. And then that we would start looking at the rhythms of the heart and the breath, and everybody would have the same breath ratio and feel each other's heart. Sometimes I'd have them actually touch each other's chest so they can feel the heartbeat and be in a rhythm and be one. And that helps you communicate when contractions occurred and the woman went through transition and had emotional shifts in it. And it was such a great thing. And it was funny because I would say, okay, the class is now over. You know, oh, you can all go home. And nobody wanted to get up. And I thought, boy, I think this is really needed. There should be more guided meditations. And to hear that's going on in your yoga class is phenomenal. You know, it's just so important.
It's so sweet. And, you know, as far as meditation goes, I also teach meditation classes separate.
So, I didn't know that.
Relaxation at the end is more of a preparation for meditation. So it kind of eases you into it. It gives you a taste of it. And then I teach a seated meditation, whether it's in the chair, on the floor, with pillows, just so you're comfortable. And that's, you know, what most people don't know is that yoga, the postures, the breathing, you know, like down dog, and you'll hear people talk about take a breath or breathe in, breathe out. You hear it all over the internet, on TV now, you know, breathe. What people don't know is all of that was designed to take you into meditation.
Right.
So if you don't have good posture and you're trying to meditate and you're hunched over like this for, you know, 20 minutes, an hour, it's going to hurt. But if if you have a structure in your body that all the muscles know how to work and can integrate with one another so that it's easy, you can sit for 20 minutes and quiet your mind and start to learn in meditation that we're not our thoughts. We think we're our thoughts. Basically, it's just information coming out of nowhere across the screen like a blip, you know, and you either choose to buy into it or you let it go.
Yeah.
Most of the time, what causes anxiety is you take it on like it's really happening.
Yeah.
So in meditation, you learn to let go of those thoughts, to witness them, let them go, witness them, let them go. And so now they know you can choose the good thoughts. Eventually, as you take it out into your life, you'll start to notice, oh, you know, I'm worried about my daughter. She's late for her, the restaurant, and she's 20 minutes late, and she's either in a ditch, you know, or she's here, or she's, you know, cut herself and she's in the emergency room. Body treats that like it's really happening. So all that cortisol is, you know, excreted into your system, you know, toxins are just flooding your system when you're thinking that. And all we do in our society is cover it up with the magic purple pill.
It's so true. One of the things that I can relate to is, you know, I'm not really anxiety ridden classically, you know, it's just not my nature to experience much anxiety. But, you know, then I had 3 daughters and I realized my concerns over what was going to happen in this crazy world with my daughters became an overwhelming emotional experience for me. And I didn't know what to do with it because it was really foreign for me to worry or to extrapolate, like you're saying, they're 20 minutes late, they're obviously in a ditch bleeding, you know, instead of they're probably just the hair didn't work out, you know, and the shoot, they couldn't, you know, something a little bit more in reality. And, but it's, you know, having that experience, as you know, as a parent, you have to grow or you're going to suffer. So I learned and it helped me empathize with people that deal with anxiety.
Yes.
And I really, boy, felt sorry. I to this day, I really have a lot of empathy for people who are ruled by anxiety. I just want to love them back to a calmer state. And obviously with yoga, you can do that.
Oh,
and
yes.
I just try to, like you said, we're not our thoughts. I think that's the biggest thing. We're not just a thinking machine. Society rewards people for being thinking machines. And then, what really happens to these people over time? They end up with chronic ailments, digestive disturbances. When I see a young person come in and they have irritable bowel syndrome or some kind of disruptive intestine, I know almost every single time this is a straight A student with a perfectionist streak running through them. And they just cannot let go of this want for perfection because they're living so much in their thoughts and this want to achieve this certain level. And it's really important. Like one of my favorite books a long time ago was The Power of Now. I remember when that came through, that was really an awakening for me to read that. And that was one of the books that got me thinking about how we're not our thoughts, but we're told we are from a young age. And it's a little disabling to just believe that that's all you are, right?
Yeah.
So, well, I have one more question for you. But before I say that, I just want to tell everybody, when you're watching these podcasts, please subscribe to the channel, give me a thumbs up, and leave comments. I'm not fragile. Please tell me what you love, what you dislike, what's obnoxious about my podcast, because we want to be able to improve this and make this a great experience for everybody. But the last question I have is, kind of a big one. What are your biggest concerns for humanity, and how can yoga help that? You said a couple of things that are powerful already in that area, but if you're to summarize, you see what's happening in the world, always. I shouldn't just say today, because to me, it's always happening. What's happening just comes up bigger and small, and we pay attention to certain things a little more than other times. But what do you think yoga can do to stop some of the suffering in humanity?
Well, that's a big one, and I could probably go on another hour with that one, but I'm going to just kind of, the word peace, finding that peace within yourself, believing that you can have that peace. So yoga helps to hone that belief, but you have to have a little seed of that belief, just a tiny little seed of belief that you can have that peace. And when you have that peace within yourself, then you're able to share that peace with others. So all the conflicts that we're having in the world right now the source is fear and anxiety. Fear, basically, fear is the main thing. Fear of not having enough, or too much, or fear of losing. Just so many fears, and we've had that before the pandemic, but it's been accentuated. So this is maybe this is the time that people can start to look toward, yes, maybe their faith and other things that they've done in the past, which I don't know what I'd do without my faith, but yoga enhanced my faith. It took me deeper into my faith. So having that peacefulness, so you could share, I always say at the end of the class, yoga, Om Shanti. Shanti means peace. Peace in our hearts, our families, our communities, and peace on the planet. We are the keepers of that peace. It starts here within yourself. So you can contribute to humanity by just taking that time for yourself, an hour and 15 minutes, once or twice a week, and a little bit on your own, 20 minutes, a couple times a week. Even once a week, I've seen huge changes in people where their boss and their colleagues say to them, wow, you're a different person. We really like this. What have you done? I mean, they've seen the difference within months.
Yeah.
So now the workplace is quiet. And I always say, so now when your boss asks you to work overtime, tell him I have a yoga class.
That's perfect. What a perfect answer.
And he'll say, well, yeah, I want you to go because I see the difference in you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Christine, this has been great. I appreciate you stopping by and talking with us about this. I've been a big fan of yours, as you know, for years, and of yoga. And I think I'm going to do yoga right as soon as I hang this up, because I'm a little laxed on that. I do certain postures all the time just to correct certain parts of me, but yeah, I think you've inspired me, and I think our listeners as well. So thanks again. I would love to do this again with you. We can maybe take a more specific series of questions. Maybe people, if anybody out there listening wants to ask questions specifically of Christine, you're yogabydesign.com, right?
It's yogabydesignstudio.com.
yogabydesignstudio.com. So they can look you up and ask questions and join one of your classes and do a complimentary class even, right? And
yeah, absolutely. We can, and I can even show them how to go onto Zoom. So obviously, if somebody's watching the podcast, they know, but maybe they have somebody in their life that isn't familiar with Zoom. I can show them. I'm getting really good at teaching people how to do Zoom.
That's great. Yeah, people watching this podcast usually watch it on Spotify or on YouTube, so they might not know Zoom. So yeah, that's nice that you offer.
So there you go.
You're a Zoom instructor as well as a yoga instructor.
I never thought I would be, but I've gotten really good. If I can teach my sister, I can teach anybody.
Okay. Is she going to hear that? She can hear that?
She is, probably.
She can take it. All right. Well, thank you, Christine. Thanks again. I appreciate it. Okay. Have a good day.
Namaste.
Thank you. You too. Thank you. You too.